So the topic is audit planning and risk assessment. As it is in every other spheres of life, there is an adage that says that when you fail to plan, you are invariably planning to failing. Audit assurance is one of the most sensitive aspects of practice in accounting that requires intentional planning. And the planning is in different phases. So as auditors, when we say audit planning, what does it entail? How do we make the plan? Why are we planning? What value addition comes with the right planning? What benefits comes with it? How will this aid our work? These are some of the things that this topic embodies. And the twin of it is risk assessment. There is no how you will say you have planned, done your proper audit planning without being able to envisaging or having expect or be skeptical that there may be some risk points and what you need to do to averting those risks. So your planning is not complete if you are not able to identify potential risks that engagement may be faced with and what you need to do to actually redressing or rewriting the wrongs, right? It goes further to looking at what type of engagement are you even looking at? Is it a continuing engagement or a first-time engagement? A continuing engagement is an engagement where the firm has always been the auditor, while a first-time engagement is an engagement where you are just auditing the clients for the very first time. The approach to this is slightly different, right? The fact that you've always been the auditor of a particular client doesn't mean you should not still do your planning, your audit planning and risk assessment diligently. You need to do. So we'll be looking at what do we need to do in the case of a new engagement. What do we need to do in the case of a continuing engagement? How do we form an audit team? Do we just look at it that, oh, so person have not gone on audits for a very long time, so let he or she be on this assignment? No, it should be a function of what are the relevant skills that particular engagement requires and who among your team has that skills, right? What are the industry knowledge or prior engagement that have been done in the past that you think that inputs from that sort of engagement will be relevant to the current engagement that you are planning? So these are all of the things that we'll be talking about today. I wish you a very interesting section today. So the outlines I will look at the definition and the need for audit planning. We'll be considering three very essential standards in auditing. We'll be looking at ISA 300, ISA 315, ISA 320, and ISA 330. I've always said this, we have a lot of auditors that do what they need to do, but my findings from most people is that they don't know why they are doing what they are doing. And what enriches your understanding and make you appreciate all the audit process, analytical procedure, how you do your materiality, what inform your materiality decisions, how do you determine your specific materiality, performance materiality, and all the sensitive processes that you need to undergo when you're doing in the process of your audit planning cycle. Nothing would have given you a richer understanding and make you appreciate all of this process if you have not gone through the relevant or the applicable standards. So while we'll talk about these standards in financial reporting, IFRS this, IFRS that, so also in audits, we have our own standards. As auditor, you need to have a very rich understanding of the IFRSs. But in addition to it, you need to also have a working knowledge or working understanding of the ISAs. So we'll be looking at ISA 300, ISA 315, ISA 320, and ISA 330. In our prior class on audits, we had looked at ISA 200 and I think maybe 210 and 220, right? And I'm sure that in the course of our material sharing, we have also shared soft copies of this standard itself. I will encourage you, while you are in traffic or while you are idle or you're just passing away time, you can download these standards on your phone and just peruse them as opposed to the time one could have spent on other non-value adding activities. Then we'll look at audit planning cycle. What does it mean? We'll be looking at the following order, the audit planning cycle. How do we accept an engagement, whether it's a new engagement or is a continuance engagement? What are the procedure? What are the things that need to be done? What is the stage one first? You have a discussion with a client has called you for a potential audit engagement. And the management, as the engagement partner, has decided that, okay, the client is good, they have no reason to not accepting them for that very engagement. You will expect that the clients will formally, in addition to all the regular talk around what is the scope of the engagement, what is the form of the report, how will it be done, what is the industry understanding of the client's business, who are their regulators and all of that. All the discussion, including the fee, will have been formally discussed, and you will expect that the clients will formally appoint you as the auditor, giving you an appointment letter, while you as the auditor will be expected to respond to that appointment letter, whether you are rejecting the appointment by communicating the appropriate letter, or you are accepting the appointment by communicating with an engagement letter. And we will look at what are the components of the engagement letter. What are the things that should be there, right? In the case of a continuance engagement, do you need to be newly appointed again or issued with an appointment letter? Do you need to issue what we call an engagement letter? There is a clear position of the ISA or the relevant ISA on that. We see that as we go on. It's also very important that you cannot audit a client appropriately if you don't have a fair understanding of the client's business. So how do we actually understudy a client? How do you do your KYC on your client? How do you know which regulator is the client subject to? What are the regulatory frameworks? What are the other legal documents that will enable you to understand the client processes, expected processes? What are the internal policies that the management has put forward? To what extent are those internal policies in conflict with the substantive regulatory documents where you are expected to advise the clients where there are variants? What are the internal controls that has been put in place? Who has the responsibility to ensuring and instilling these internal controls? And what is your own responsibility to checking whether those internal controls or those control measures are effective as expected? We'll be looking at all of this. Then identifying significant accounts, which accounts or segments of the account or charts of the account are relevant for you to pay material attention to in the course of your audit engagement. It is expected that the management will have made what we call a management assertions. There are assertions that have been made in the accounts that the asset is this, the liability is this, we have made XYZ income, we have made XYZ profit, we have made XYZ loss, so expenses have been incurred, we have accumulated capital or share, so extent and all that. These are various assertions that have been made in the financial statement. You as auditor, you are expected to reaffirm by independently examining processes that gave rise to these assertions and attest to whether those assertions are as proposed or communicated by the management or otherwise, right? How do we set materiality? The concept of materiality was also in accounting, in financial reporting. It is specifically mentioned in IAS 1, right? But what is the purview or the perspective of audit to this? We'll be learning that in the course of the work. We look at how to identify risks. We look at risks related to parties that have common interests. We look at risks arising from fraud. We look at risks that could serve as a threat to the going concern of the company, and risks with respect to corporate governance, compliance, or adherence of an organization. You look at assessing the controls. How do we test the controls? Whether you want to test the controls manually, or you want to do some substantive tests, automated, right? Then, of course, we look at how to develop your audit strategy memorandum. What is it itself? So this will give you a preamble. This has given you a preamble link of what we are to look at today. Please, I want to be sure I'm not alone. I want to be sure that we are all together and you understand and you understand and you are ready for this. If truly so, please communicate on the chat box by indicating yes. Awesome, awesome. I observed that we just have like 19 people logged in. Please, I will expect Matilda and co to re-engage the platform, let them know that this session has started. All right, so the objective of audit planning and risk assessment is, one, to understand why audit planning is done. Why do we have to even do planning at all? What is the relevance of advantages that comes with planning? Maybe I should put it to the house, particularly for those who attended yesterday's class. We've considered some of this yesterday. What are the advantages of audit planning? You can either enable your mic or communicate via the chat box. What are the advantages that you think from experience could come with audit planning? We have said that one of the objectives of this topic is that it helps us to know why we should do audit planning. So, because we have had the discussion before, what are the benefits that comes with planning at all, even if it is not related to audit? If you are planning or if you have planned for something very well, what are the benefits that you think should come with it? You see, you have something to say, okay? Have the floor. Who is that?
Jumoke, sir.
Oh, Jumoke, good to hear from you again.
Yes, sir. From what you said yesterday, you said audit planning ensures that work is completed properly.
Okay.
Ensures, okay. Yes, ensures work is completed properly, like within the specified period of time.
So it makes your audit process very efficient and effective.
Yes,
okay.
And make sure that no important part is left out, sir.
Very key, very key, very key, very key, very key. All right, who also have minimized costs of audits? Yes, Danjuma, very correct. It enables us to carry out the audit effectively. Olamide, well noted, thank you. Danjuma also says that it helps us to focus attention of the auditor on those right places. All right, and identify the right risk. Okay, so if you will agree with me that if you plan very well, you couldn't have done proper planning and you wouldn't identify all the stages involved in the process that you are about to embark upon. Khadija says that it enables us to gain an understanding of the clients or the entity. Very, very correct. Very, very correct. Thank you for your contributions. So planning helps you to know what is the cycle or the stages or the process of the entire process of what you're about to do, right? If you know the process, then you will know what is the skill required at each and every of these processes. You will also have an in-depth understanding of the risks or the danger or the hazard or the problem you could encounter in the course of each of these processes. And of course, you can't do all of that without gaining an understanding of what the client does, who should handle what are the potential or the possible problems that the client is likely to having, and what do we do, or what should we do when those problems eventually surface. Remember, at the planning stage, you are just speculating that some things may be wrong, right? And having made that speculation, you also have it at the back of your mind that should it be that when we get on field, we found that our speculations were actually realistic, right? What should we do? But without right planning, you will probably just stumble on the problem and you will then be crying foul. What do I do now to curb the problem? No. So right planning will have put you before in the shoes of the auditor, as though you have commenced the whole process, as though you have encountered the problem, as though you have solved the problem even before you start the whole audit process. So that is part of the things that we seek to achieve. Then the factors to take into consideration during the audit planning process. What are those factors that should be taken into consideration? Okay, so based on what we have explained thus far too, what are those factors that you think we should take into consideration? What are those factors? Abdul Wahab, I'd like to hear from you. What are those factors that you think we should take into consideration? Are there any opinion? Joy. I don't think I've ever heard Joy contribute anything since we started. Joy, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what's your view to this? What are those factors? Have you made any contribution before now?
I think I'm just coming in.
Sorry?
No, sir.
Okay, I'd like to hear from you, even if what you say may not be totally correct. We are here to learn from each other and even correct each other's mistakes. The point we are discussing about is objective of audit planning and risk assessment. And
Yes,
number 2 objective is the factors that right planning help us to identify factors to take into consideration during audit planning process. Can you give me one of those factors? Are you an auditor?
No, sir.
Do you work in an audit firm? Where do you work?
No, I work in a real estate company.
Oh, you are in which unit there?
In accounts.
Okay, yeah. So as an accountant, you should be able to know because you have interface with the auditors, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just tell me your opinion. Nobody will crucify you.
I think you make mention of probably factors to take into consideration, maybe the understanding of the business, something like that.
Yeah, very key. That's good. Clap for yourself. I think you tried. So because it's a very important factor, you need to know the client's business. So why that one is relevant to you or to the audit team is that you will now ask yourself, okay, let's assume that you have a client that is into mining, right? Okay. That is what the client does. So you will need to ask the whole team who has done or worked in mining industry before. If you have any of your team who have worked in that mining industry before or who have had similar experience before, it makes it easier for them to relate with those specific terminologies or work process around that industry. So right planning helps you to identify those key factors. It makes you to identify who has the requisite knowledge and skill that will be relevant on the job. You will not expect to have a group of auditors that will be on field and it is the client that will now be teaching you ABC. Of course, you want to learn and hear from the client, right? but not as though you don't have any knowledge of the client's business at all. Do you understand? So
Yes,
these
sir.
are very essential essential things as factors that we need to take into consideration. Khadija said characteristics of the company, including the nature of the business, the controls
Yeah.
of the entity. Absolutely correct. Somebody want to say something, or is it just a distraction?
Oh, sorry.
Olamide, you want to say something, or you are distracting us?
Yes. I have to say something.
Okay, you have the floor.
The risks, I think we should consider the risk of the business.
Yeah, so give us an example now.
The risks
Are
of
you
the
an
business.
auditor?
No.
Well, give us an example. You're an accountant.
An example of the risk. Probably competitors.
Okay, so let me
The
give you this
general
example.
industry.
Let me give you this example. You want to audit a company in the finance sector, right? And the client's business is fully automated. So there could be a risk that's of financial or digital fraud. Do you understand? So you want to be sure that requisite processes and controls have been put in place to curtail those excesses. That could be a typical example. Somebody want to say something? You're raising your hand.
Yes, good
Timothy?
evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening, Timothy.
Yeah. Yeah, if I should go along with what you said yesterday as regard to that, one of the risks involved is fine. Like you said yesterday, that probably you were about to be engaged with an entity as their auditor, and probably the accountant of the company or the MD, as the case may be, telling you that, okay, so firm, since we are appointing you as our auditor, the fee you are giving us probably help me add 300 or 200,000 or 300,000 to hit is one of the risks that an auditor should be very sensitive about.
Yeah.
Also, you also make mention of there could be probably a little ratio between the accountant of the company, probably be a female, and the MD. If you notice any also is another risk to look into. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's very important. So you need to test your risks of threats to your independence, right? If you are to take an engagement and the key influential officer in the company says, oh, your audit fee is 2 million, but help me build in 500 inside. That is a risk trigger. If that person or that officer can do it for you as an auditor, definitely they have been doing it all around in the company's process. You understand? Or you notice that, oh, there is a relationship, an informal relationship between key reportable officers, maybe the MD and the accountant or the internal control or whatever. So it triggers. It tells you that, oh, there may be a problem. Or you notice that you check the background of the accountants and you find an accountant that read maybe English and has never had relevant financial reporting working experience. The fact that somebody does not have HICAN or study accounting as a first degree doesn't mean they may not have working knowledge. But in your engagement, you check the track record, you don't see anything. So justifying that, oh, this person really have relevant working experience in accounting. And they said the person is the head of accounts. So you should expect the worst. You should expect assets will have been classified as income or even liability or messed up a lot of issues. So these are part of the factors that you need to take into consideration before you even go on the field at all. So as you're looking at those factors, you are also playing the devil's advocate, trying to say, okay, should this thing be as you have envisaged it? What are we to do to correcting or ensure that we make the right opinion on this engagement? Then the last one is Also to help assess risks that are identified and develop controls around them. So, I will quickly just brush through this because we've explained all of this before. So we explained that planning as it is required to complete on the audit effectively within a specified time. So if you don't make the right planning, of course, you won't even know when should be a defined time within which you're expected to completing your audit. Timothy, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. Please, you make mention of something where you are during the course of your discussion some minutes ago. I didn't understand. You were saying a company that is fully automated, there could be some risk. I don't understand that part, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so you have, let's say, an IT company, right? An IT company is a company that is expected that all their processes will have been fully automated. Do you understand? Then, as part of your risk assessment procedure, you need to test control around those technology automation they have built around their system. Okay, let me give you a typical example. I walk into an IT company or any other company that use automation, and they have told me, or I've read it in part of their control book, that no staff will have access to the business premises without their ID card and thumbprints on the door before they get access. And I find out that while I'm there, or I emphasize that what could happen, is it every time that automation or those control will be very effective? What happens during the downtime? And the company says, oh, we've read it, so we never had any downtime. So as part of your planning, you will need to test. You will put it as part of your test measures that you need to test that those assertions that they have made, that at every point in time, everybody who should come into the office, particularly areas that are very sensitive because of the finance, as is strictly controlled. So if, as part of your planning, you will put that into test, that you have to check that whether it's actually working. So when you get to the field, some of those questions you will ask is to checking those assertions they have made. Or let it be that when you even get there, even you that you are not even their staff, you were able to get access to the premises without anybody overriding those controls for you. So it tells you that, oh, if me as an external person could have access and override access without an approval, definitely all those controls that they said they are put in place is foul. Do you understand? One of those other controls is, let's also assume that you are auditing a bank. In their vault room is a very sensitive and highly controlled area. So if they told you that, oh, the vault room door can only be opened with a thumbprint of a pre-registered person who has been affirmed as being responsible, and you then get there, you find the door to the vault room opened, meaning that those who are not even authorized to even get access would have or could have gained access. Those are part of those automation I'm talking about. You know also that we work in a very, most of the offices or companies you see around now, you see CCTV installed everywhere. Part of those controls in sensitive areas is that you look around when you go to an ATM point. Do you observe that there is usually CCTV strategically positioned there? So if you get to a particular bank ATM and you don't see a CCTV there, in the course of your audit, it is an exception. But of course, it depends on what sort of audits you are doing. Do you understand? So You have to look at those controls that are very sensitive to your client's process, and ask them, how do they manage those controls? Are they managing those controls manually, or they are managing it automated? So if it is automated, definitely you need to check the effectiveness of that automation. If it is manual, meaning that somebody has to give an express approval, you need to check that who is said to Sorry, can you hear me? I lost you at a point, or you lost me at a point. Hello, confirm if you can hear me, please. Yeah, and also confirm if you can see my screen. Okay. So like I was saying, at that point, we find out that the signatories to certain accounts were still those executives whose tenure has elapsed. That is a major weakness in their control. Somebody is not on the current executive board, right? It was part of their gone executive board, but the mandate to the signatories to the account has not been changed. It's a major control. You could not have done an audit and not find that out. So proper planning will have helped you to put in procedures in place to check in who are the major signatories now, when did they take over, who are the former signatories, and all of that. So that is what I'm trying to, the point I'm trying to make it. All right, so audit planning is a process of deciding in advance what is to be done, who is to do what, how what is to be done, and when what is to be done by the auditor in order to have effective or an efficient completion of work. Audit planning helps in the accomplishment of objectives of audits, and we have discussed some of these objectives. It also ensures that appropriate attention is devoted to important areas of the audit. Very, very important. Audit planning ensures that work is completed properly within the time and no important area is left out. Audit planning facilitates the coordination of work done by the auditor. So it helps you to know what should we do first, after what next, after what next, after what next. So it puts coordination system control around the processes of the audit. Then audit planning helps in improving the quality of work done and provide promptness in audit performance. You know exactly what to do per time. And we did took a case study of ISA 300. ISA 300 is entirely on how to plan for the audit of a financial statement. Planning an audit of financial statements benefits the auditor in several ways. So if you have audited financial statements of several companies and you have never read these standards, then it means you probably might not have been doing the right thing, or you don't have a fair understanding of why you are doing what you have always been doing in your firm. So please take time out to read this material. Helping the auditor to devote appropriate attention to important areas of the audit, helping the auditor to identify and resolve potential problems on a timely basis, helping the auditor to properly organize and manage the audit engagement so that it is performed in an efficient and effective manner. So why I'm not wasting time on all this is because I've explained it before. Assisting in the selection of audit engagement team. So proper planning helps you to know who should be part of the team of a particular audit client or audit assignment with appropriate level of capability. So you have to, it's not on, oh, because so-so person is my friend or so-so person is not your friend, or so-so person you like him or her, or so-so person you don't like him or her. You have to look at what is the peculiarity of this assignment, who has the ability and the technical know-how on it, and the competence, and you make sure that you put the right person on the right team. And competence to responding to anticipated risk and the proper assignment of work to them. Facilitating the direction and supervision of audits of engagement team members and the review of their work. So it is not just about composing your team, you also have an understanding of who has the requisite skill to managing this team, who is in the best, who is the appropriate engagement partner to supervising this particular, to managing this particular engagement. Facilitating the direction and supervision of engagement team members and review of their work. Assist where applicable in coordination of work done by auditors of components and experts. So where you need third party's opinion, or you have a group audit and some other audit firms are to handle some other part of the whole group. So you will that your work process is not entirely based in other auditing firms, right? And when you need to use an expert's opinion, you will have to be sure that you have certified that that expert is expected or is certified to have had the right skill, right qualification. You are not testing the person, but you are only assessing maybe prior work done, maybe professional affiliations of the person, and on the premise of that, placing reliance on the level of, on the opinion provided by such professional. So part of the audit planning process starts with what you have to do before you even go on field, what you do while you are on field, and what you do after you have left the field. So preliminary audit engagement activities. The auditor shall undertake the following activities at the beginning of the current engagement. I told you about what a current engagement is, a new engagement, right? You need to perform procedures regarding the continuance of the relationship, of the client relationship and the specific audit engagement. So you want to know, these clients have always been their auditor. From the last time you audited them till this very current period, what has changed? Has their structure changed? Have they added another service line? Have they added, is there complex, is the regulator provides their processes should be? So you need to get that understanding, procedures, perform the relevant procedures around that. Evaluate compliance with relevant ethical requirements, including independence. So you should be able to know, we've talked about the ethical values that auditors should uphold. So you need to assess that those particular ethical requirements are being upheld. Part of what I've mentioned earlier on, you want to take an engagement and the accountant or the manager there is saying, had my own portion. It tells you a lot of things about the ethical values. Then establishing an understanding of the terms of the engagement. It is not a wrong thing for a client to wanting to engage in you on an assignment and you say, on this line of your work, I don't have the requisite skills. It is not wrong, right? But what will be wrong is where you know that you don't have the requisite skill and you still go ahead to taking it without taking any caution on how to bridge that knowledge gap. So you need to establish an understanding of the terms of the engagement. You need to be sure that you know what your responsibility is as the auditor, you know what should be the responsibility, and you have communicated it rightly to the auditees, right? And everybody or each party of those engagements has played their functions, even where you need to render some level of assistance. It is under a mutual understanding, not that you don't have your cutoff point. So planning activities. The auditor shall establish an overall coverage of what your assignment is. Are you auditing 1 year? Are you auditing 2 years? Are you auditing 3 years? What are the lines of activities that the company is doing? Are they a company that have various streams of income? They have branches within the country or outside the kind of scope. You need to agree the time that will be convenient for such audit engagements. Don't allow clients to box you that this audit can be completed in 24 hours, in 2 days, in 3 days, in 2 weeks. You have to look at the scope of the work, what is the technicalities that will be required, and how much of time can you deploy in getting the objective met, and direction of the audit. And that guides the development of the audit plan. So all of these, the timing, the scope, the direction, serve as a guide to the development of your audit plan. In establishing the overall audit strategy, the auditor shall, one, identify the characteristics of the engagement that define its scope. So what are the peculiarity of the companies of that engagement or the auditees processes that define the scope of what you have to do? So what type of engagement are you doing? Is it a reasonable assurance engagement or a limited assurance engagement? Is it an engagement that your responsibility as the auditor is as defined by the law? Or is it an engagement that your responsibility as the auditor or the assurance provider is as determined by the client, right? Ascertain the reporting objectives of the engagement to plan the timing, right? Then consider the factors that in the auditor's professional judgment are significant in directing the engagement team's effort. So all of these things are very key for you to having a properly planned and a well-risk assessed audit engagement. Consider the results of the preliminary engagement activities and where applicable, whether knowledge gain Sorry, little distraction from here, back. All right, I'm back. I'm so sorry. There is a little distraction from here. I'm sure you can hear me now. Hello, can you hear me? I need somebody to confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So the D is consider the result of preliminary engagement activities and where applicable, whether knowledge gain in the other engagement performed by the engagement partners for the entity is relevant. And the last one is ascertain the nature, timing, and the extent of resources necessary to performing the engagement. So planning helps you to know what it will cost you, how it is to be done, who will be required, what are the potential problems we could encounter in the course of the work, and what do we do to managing the whole processes. Any question on this? Any question? Any question thus far? Can I go on?
Yes, sir. Sir. Good evening, sir.
Yeah. Is that Raymond?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you have the floor.
Yeah. What about the materiality check?
Yes, so materiality check is part of what we had to do. We are still coming there. We are looking at what is the requirement per each of those standards.
Okay,
you understand? We are looking at ISA 300 as we speak.
Okay, sir.
All right, so the auditor shall develop an audit plan where that shall include a description of, one, the nature, timing, and extent of planned risk assessment procedures as determined. Two, the nature, timing, and extent of planned further audit procedures at the assertion levels as determined under. Then third, other planned audit procedures that are required to be carried out so that the engagement can complies with IFRS. I'm sorry. Right? So your audit planning must be done in such a way that you are not in any way, or you have not done it in any way to have violated any relevant provisions of ISAs. The auditor shall update and change the overall audit strategy and the audit plan as necessary during the course of the audit where the need arises. So if you have put up a plan and you find out that, oh, on you getting on field, you met something different, you don't have to religiously follow the plan all through when you know that it will not be suitable for the circumstance at hand, right? So your planning must be flexible enough to accommodate requisite changes that may be required from time to time. The auditor shall plan the nature and the timing and extent of directions and supervision of engagement team members and the review of their work. So in your planning too, you don't just plan how the work will be done, but you also put into perspective how those who are doing what is to be done are to be supervised, how the team members, the supervisors are to be supervised, the managers are to be supervised, how the potential biasness of the engagement partner can also be managed. All that needs to be put in the right perspective. The auditor shall include in the audit documentation, one, the overall audit strategy. What strategy have you deployed has been very suitable for the engagement at hand. Two, the audit plan. Three, any significant change made during the audit engagement to the overall audit strategy and the audit plan, and the reason for such a change. The auditor shall undertake the following activities prior to starting an initial audit. So you will look at everything that we have explained here, talking about the audit strategy, the audit plan, those processes or procedures that need to be done. In fact, every engagement is every audit firm is expected to have what we call an audit manual. So the audit manual of each firm will actually enumerate what are the various strategies that in the firm's policy should be adoptable per time to suit the situations that have been predefined. How do we make our audit plan? What are the various components of it? Do you understand? So if your firm have not been doing that, I think it's one of the things that you need to advise as appropriate. All right, so what then happens if you have an initial audit, right? If you're having an initial audit, that is, you are taking up an audit for the very first time, what are the things you need to do? Perform procedures required by ISA 220. Who can tell us what ISA 220 talks about? ISA 220 is about what? ISA 220 is about what?
Communication with the outgoing auditors.
You sure? Are you sure? ISA 220 is what? Timothy. Timothy, you have the floor. You're raising your hand. Or Freeman. ISA 220 talks about what? Don't tell me nobody knows this. Is Adeniyi here? Akitayo, what is ISA 220? Khadija,
Yes,
what is ISA 220? Is Grace in the house?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. I think 220, if I'm right, is quality control.
Are you sure you did not go and check it?
No.
Okay, it's actually
Actually, I downloaded it yesterday, so I was just going through it, but I've not really mastered them all.
So you need to know all of these things. ISA 220 talks about quality control for an audit engagement, for an audit of financial statements. So when you are taking a new audit or audit for the very first time, the ISA 300 is telling you that make sure that you have done, first of all, what is required by ISA 220, right? So we've had that discussion before. You can take your time to go and look at ISA 220. Regarding the acceptance of the client relationship, so you need to know, is it a client that you are in a better position to being of service to? Do you think you have any form of familiarity trait? Do you have the requisite skill to do the client's job? Do you have the understanding of the client's business? All of those things need to be cleared before you take up a new engagement. Then communications with the predecessor auditor, that is the outgoing auditor, where there has been a change of the auditor. So if the company is just appointing auditor for the very first time, of course, there is no auditor to communicate with. But if there is a change in the auditors, you need to communicate with the formal auditor, affirming that if there are reasons in his opinion why you should not continue with such engagement. And one other thing you should also do is that you should also ensure that all that this is due to the outgoing auditor has been paid to it, right? So you should be your brother's keeper, because if that is done or that is not done, the clients that decide to withhold the fee of an outgoing auditor will soon do same for you. So you must be able to follow all the requisite due process in a new engagement, right? All that in addition to all that we have earlier discussed. So that is a brief that we need to have about ISA 300. Please take your time to go through as part of the materials I will be sharing this week for this topic. We include the actual ISA 300 there. And don't forget, ISA 300 is about planning and audit of financial statements. Whether it is an audit, whether it's a continuing audit or is a first-time audit. And sometimes you need to know that these ISAs are interwoven. So you can see here, we are talking about ISA 300, planning and audit of financial statements, and somewhere along the line, it linked with ISA 220. Somewhere along the line, it will also link with ISA 200, because you need to know the objective of that very audit engagement. Any question before we move to another standard? Any question? Any question or contributions? Timothy, your hands is up. You have the floor, or confirm if it's an error.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, you have the floor.
Yes, I think I'm very impressed with that. It's at 300. According to what you said, that fine. When you are doing the course of audit planning, your audit planning shouldn't be just something that you just follow. Like, you have to be flexible in such a way that by the time you get to the field, you can be able to change if what you made there is not what you planned for. For instance, it happened to me anyway, of which I was just what would I do? So as you said, my mind just go there straight. That, oh, fine, this is what this is. I think I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you too. But you need to know that if you are not the team lead, and for any reason there is justification to changing the already pre-planned audit process, you must get the approval of your team lead and possibly the audit manager. Let them know what is the situation you have on ground and why you think it is justifiable to making that change. Hope that is noted.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so we'll be looking at ISA 315 now, which is also relating to identifying and assessing the risks of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. Don't forget, this topic is audit planning and risk assessment, and you cannot assess the risks of a client if you don't know the client. You cannot plan an audit if you don't do risk assessment. So it is kind of interwoven, right? So for us to do the right planning and do the right risk assessment, we need to know what this standard has also provided. I need a volunteer reader, please. Volunteer.
Okay, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Mr. Raymond.
It's at 315. Identifying and assessing the risks of material misstatement through understanding the entity and its environment. The objective of the auditor is to identify and assess the risks of material misstatement.
Sorry, can you give me, hold on, give me a minute.
All right, sir.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. Welcome back,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm so sorry I had to just switch power.
Yes, sir.
So you can go on.
Okay. The objective of the auditor is to identify and assess the risks of material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, at the financial statement and assertion levels, through understanding the entity and its environment, including the entity internal control, thereby providing a basis for designing and implementing responses to the assessed risks of material misstatement.
All right, so just for clarification's sake, the objective of the auditor is to identify, that is within the purview of ISA 315, is to identify and assess the risks of material misstatements, whether due to fraud. So when you are assessing those risks of material misstatements, we are looking at the likelihood that fraud has occurred. You know, we had an argument back then in school days or even in the course of our ICANN program, that the function of an auditor is not to detect fraud, right? But diligent audit procedure will help you to identify fraud if any had occurred. So this standard is further reaffirming that those risk assessments you're doing, you need to emphasize the potential or the possibility that fraudulent activity could have occurred or error could have also occurred. Are the financial statements and the assertions made therein through the understanding of the client's business. So you are not just standing aloof and possibly looking at how could somebody have made an error or how could a fraud have been committed. But you are looking at the client's peculiarity. What are the things that are peculiar to this client? What are the kind of fraud that could be peculiar to their operations or to their business model, right? And its environment, where they operate and the likes, including the entity's internal control. So you pay also due attention to internal controls, thereby providing a basis for designing and implementing response to the assessed risks. So somebody asked me yesterday that how could they actually define or develop a risk assessment? So these are the things you need to know. First of all, who is the client? Which sector is the client operating from? So you now ask yourself the question, what are the problems, the kind of fraud, the kind of errors that those operating in this kind of sector are likely to be facing, right? Then you now narrow it down to the client itself. What are the controls, the policies that the company has or did not have? How effective are those policies? So you need to request for their internal control policy book and read through it to identifying how effective are those policies have been. Then you now need to put to test some of those control measures that they have imputed in their policy book. You plan some of the questions that you will ask when you get to field to know whether those controls are effective or they are not. Do you understand? So this is very essential in identifying and assessing the risks of material misstatement. The auditor shall perform risk assessment procedures to provide a basis for the identification. So what are our basis for the identification? The regulator, the regulatory documents, the internal control policies, the company's policy book, and other processes that are peculiar with the company's business model. An assessment of risks of material misstatement. So we are not saying there cannot be misstatements, but the misstatement that we are looking at must be material in nature. And what is the definition of materiality? So you need to also look at that within the plight of what IS1 has called it and what definition ISA has given to it at the financial statement and assertion level. Risk assessment procedures by themselves, however, do not provide sufficient appropriate evidence. So the fact that you have put forward those protocols or procedures that you will carry out in doing or in appraising the risks when you get to the field, it is not enough that I have drafted those policies, I've drafted those approaches. It doesn't give you an absolute guarantee that you will be able to gather sufficient evidence, right? So, however, do not provide a sufficient appropriate evidence on which to base audit opinion. So you will have to also complement all those risk assessment protocols or procedures with every other personal judgment of yours, because it may not be convincing enough that the company is doing well or is not doing well, or is facing or is likely to face going concern threat, or is not, or fraud has occurred, or fraud has not. Another volunteer reader, please. Oh, Timothy wants to ask a question. Let's hear Timothy. What's your question?
Oh, sorry, it's an error, please.
Okay. Volunteer reader, please.
Hello,
So
good evening. Sir. Hello.
Yeah, Francis
Hello?
wants to say something. You have the floor,
Yeah.
Francis.
Okay, I want to read.
Okay, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Okay, continuation of the if I say 315. The standard requires that the auditor should, bullet point 1, perform risk assessment procedures and related activities. These activities shall be inquiries from management and others, analytical procedures, observations, and inspections.
Okay, so just hold it from there. So let's clarify that. So this Article 15 is giving you, is expanding how you will do your risk assessment. So the standard requires the auditor to, that you should, one, perform risk assessment procedure and related activities. What are those risk assessment procedures and related activities? These activities include inquiry. So you have to form some questions based on your own judgment that you need to ask the management, right? As a tool to accessing potential risks that the company is facing or is likely to face, right? It's not only the management, but other key officers within the organization. You need to do analytical procedure. What do we mean by analytical procedure? Comparing key financial statement disclosures of prior period with the current period and determine the variances, right? If in the prior year their turnover is 12 billion and in the current year their turnover is 1 billion, so you need to ask question, what happened? Do you have issues around your customer not wanting to patronizing you again? They could tell you, no, all our customers patronize us. You then ask, do you reduce the selling price? They will tell you, no, it will sold at the same selling price. Were you
This guy was he able to fix this Joshua's back?
Yes, sir.
And the guy now this thing. It's a real work. Is
The-
he making shoe? Is he a shoemaker or shoe shiner?
A shoemaker.
So if you measure my leg now, if you do shoe for me.
Why not?
Yeah?
Why not? What's this thing going off now?
Don't add pattern for that thing. person? Person.
Oh.
Chimney Bank.
Hard pattern. See hard pattern for Chimere. Now what in talks we go do? That's why the thing don't tell if not. The Joshua owns he put black zip, but if you come go do one thing, one will give me first. They go put super glue on top, they no need. For the zip for the back side. No, there's super glue nearly chop the zip.
Why did they put super glue?
You don't know the thing. Look, come out now. You just make the zip no fine again that side. You carry see the bag on top here. Bring a show you again on top. See where super glue for. See here.
Maybe he was trying to.
No. Super glue pour on top the part. He don't finish work now. See this side. See how this side is. What you want thread? What you do now?
He still use glue.
You go use glue, but this one, the super glue when you use, the proper glue, you forget to leave on top the back. The thing pour on top one begin chop. I don't know if you understand.
So super glue is strong, Rich.
If super glue pour on top something, now chop you go chop. Now rub the rubber. Super glue no be rub the rubber. I rub the rubber now. But they okay, they work. No be say no they work. I didn't put those things there. I didn't
I'm sorry, my network has been funny today. Are we there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for standing by.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so where do we stop?
We are still on the bullet point 1.
Okay, so I was trying to explaining what that bullet point 1 talks about, what we mean by the risk assessment procedures, part of the questionnaires that you need to form, justifying what you need to ask from the from the management, part of the analytical procedures that you need to do, the observations you need to conduct. I think at the end of this topic, we should actually give an assignment to each and every person, picking a client in each unique sector, right? And we trying to drawing up our audit planning and risk assessment questionnaires. It will just, but don't do that until when you have read through the standards and this particular slides. All right, next one. Go ahead,
Okay.
Francis.
The next one is, all right, the next one. Consider information obtained during client acceptance or continuance process.
Okay, so you need to, in part of your risk assessment, you need to consider the information you have obtained from the client before you accepted the client engagement or for a continuous engagement process. You're trying to look at, do you have anything that does not add up among the information that they have earlier provided you with and the feedback you got from those questionnaires? Are there conflicting information? So you need to be able to juxtapose the feedback you have. Then next one.
Next point, information from other engagements.
All right, so particularly if you have a client in that same industry, you need to relate what you have heard from your current client with feedback that you already had from other engagements. Why is there difference, or are there similarities? Next one.
Okay, the last point on this slide, while using previous year information, consider if there is any change in circumstances that may impact that information.
Yeah, of course. So you need to look at instances whereby the company has increased their scope of activity compared to the prior year information. Let's say they used to have 2 departments before, now they've added 3 or 4, which also earn its own unique income. Let's say before they don't have a branch outside the main state before, if their state is in FCT, if their location is primarily in FCT, now they now have a location outside the state. So what are those controls around ensuring that right remittances and reports are obtained from branches of that nature? Let's say they don't have branches outside the country before, and now they have branches outside the country. So you need to look at those informations that are peculiarly unique in the current period. All right.
Okay, should I continue, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, engagement partner and engagement team shall discuss the susceptibility of the entity's financial statements to material misstatement and the application of the applicable financial reporting framework to the entity's facts and circumstances.
Very correct. You said, you recall I said that your work as an auditor is not limited to your good understanding of the auditing standard alone. You need to be very sound on the accounting standards too. You need to be abreast of the relevant frameworks. You need to be abreast of the regulatory peculiarity of each of the industries. So when you pick a client, the audit team should also then discuss with the audit partner, what are the possibility of these clients' financial statement being porous or exposed to material misstatement. So you need to discuss the facts and figures, compare the facts or information you've gathered, look at the implication of the analytical procedures you've done. All of those things need to be discussed. All this must occur before you go on field. All this will give you insights on what you should then concentrate on when you get to the field. All right, go on.
Okay, in understanding the entity and its environment, including the entity's internal control, the auditor should, 1, get understanding of entity and its environment. This include and not limited to understanding relevant industry, regulatory requirements, reporting requirements, operations, ownership, entity selection of accounting policies, business risks that may result in material misstatements, and measurement of entities' performance.
Exactly. So you know that this standard is not just talking about risk assessment, but you are trying to assessing risks by attaining good understanding of the client's peculiarity and its environment. So for you to be able to do that, you need, I think I've explained most of these terms, that you need to have good understanding, industry knowledge. You need to know what their regulator expects of them. You need to know their reporting requirements. You need to understand the company's policy, operational procedures. You need to know who owns it, vis-a-vis what are the requirements of CAC or CAMA about, or the specific regulator about that kind of business, right? You need to be able to be sure that the entity selection of accounting policy is done with the mindset of giving a true and fair view, right? You need to know the business risks.
What one now? You really looking for?
Clement, why are you doing this? Clement, you are disturbing us. Clement, mute your mic, please. All right, so that is what that is all about. I saw a couple of hands up. Abdul Wahab, you have your hands up. Timothy has his hands up. Do you want to ask a question or it's a mistake? Do you guys have a question or is it a mistake?
Yeah, I want to ask a question, sir.
Okay, make it snappy, please.
So I actually see a business risk here. So I want to understand, does audit, I know there is audit risk. Does audit risk has a formula?
Okay, so of course, you know that audit risk is a component of a number of other risks, right? Let me put it to the house. Even your normal knowledge of audit and assurance and advanced audit and assurance exposes us to what makes up an audit risk. Can anybody answer that? But if not, I will provide an answer to that. Khadija, you want to answer it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Audit components of audit risk is divided into two: risk of material misstatement and detection risk. Then risk of material misstatement is further divided into inherent risk and control risk.
All right, that's very correct. So you need to know what are the constituents of, Khadija, still hold it there. What are the constituents of inherent risk? What are the constituents of control risk? Explain it to him so that he can get it clearer.
Okay, so inherent risk just has to do with the susceptibility of the assertions we make, like occurrence, existence that we make in as regards transactions, events, or balances. The susceptibility of those assertions to material misstatements, either independently or as a group or as aggregates.
Okay, so simplify what she has said or what she's trying to communicate in.
Okay.
What you say inherent is that what's the likelihood or the peculiarity of a client to being exposed to certain risk. Risks that could likely be made, or errors or misstatement that could likely be made by virtue of its own internal processes, right? So if in a company's process, they say that anything above, you want to identify what makes up an asset, right? What is their policy on this attaining what makes up an asset? Do you understand? You know, there are assertions that must be passed before you can classify that an item is good to go to be classified as an asset. So if those assets and those items don't pass those tests, then it is not so, right? One of those tests you also as an auditor will want to test is that very item, is it in existence? So that existence, among other things, should have been passed. So the possibility that they would have made a wrong conclusion or a wrong assertion or a wrong communication by virtue of the weaknesses in their internal control is inherent risk. Can you explain the control risk to me?
Okay, for the control risk, it's just the risk that all the controls that the company or the entity puts in place will not be able to prevent or detect risk, be material misstatement, sorry.
Absolutely. So you know that CAMA actually puts the responsibility of putting the right internal controls or control measures as that of the director's responsibility. Yes, so those controls that they have put in place, does it help in curtailing fraud, curtailing errors, and every other forms of misappropriations of assets or other forms of misappropriations? If yes, then we'll say their control is effective. So the auditor, while you are making your risk assessment procedures or planning, you must have been able to put in measures. What are the kind of exposure, control risk exposures that this company is likely to have it? And what are those questionnaires or personal judgment or assessment that you want to use to testing the effectiveness and efficiency of those controls? Do you understand?
Yes,
I believe we've been able to answer the question of Wahab. Wahab, you asked the question, right?
Yes, sir. But can it be transformed into a formula? Because the question actually came as a surprise for me. The question is an objective question. Audit risk formula.
Yes, the formula has just been given to you. Khadija, can you please provide the formula again?
Okay, I think he's asking about that formula that has to do with audit risk, which is equals to inherent risk times control risk times detection risk.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, the detection part of it is not a function of the company, but that of you as the auditor. Were you able to identify weaknesses that are embedded in the system with your efficient and effective audit plan?
Thank you, sir.
All right. So Francis, over to you. Can we go on?
Okay, I think we have
taking this slide, right?
Slide. Yes,
okay, next one.
Okay, get understanding of internal control relating to audit. This include and not limited to understanding and evaluating design of internal control, components of internal control that are control environment, the entity risk assessment process, the information system, including the related business processes relevant to financial reporting and communication, control activities relevant to the audit and monitoring of controls.
Okay, so this one is just talking about the detection part of the audit risks, trying to be sure that those control risks that the management has presumably taken steps to have mitigated, right, are as effective as it ought to be. So you need to have an understanding of what that control is and what measure has been taken, how effective are those measures that have been put in place, whether in terms of their information technology, whether in terms of their control in purchase and requisition of raw materials, whether in terms of the use of assets and all of those things. So for example, some companies that have assets such as motor vehicle may have a policy that under no circumstance should any of their official cars slip outside the office premises without an approval, right? So if you now want to monitor the movement register of that one of the motor vehicle, and you find out that on so days, without due approval, that particular motor vehicle was not even in the premises. That is where you are using a manual process. If you are using an automated process, there could have been a tracker on the car, right? So you just need to look at the archive and see where are the cars on selected days. So if you don't see the location of the car within the premises, is a trigger that those controls they are put in place is not as effective as it ought to be, right? So this audit work is actually very encompassing. You have to continue to beef up your process year in, year out. You might not get it absolutely one day, but I will expect that everybody in the position of inflation control in the organization that works in an audit firm will go back after this training and see what have they been doing rightly that they need to continue to emulate, what have they not been doing rightly that they need to overhaul and see ways of improving upon. So over to you. Any question before we go on? If there is no question, Francis, over to you.
Okay. The auditor shall perform risk assessment procedures to provide a basis for the identification and assessment of risks of material misstatements at the financial statement and assertion levels.
So there should be a justification. Okay. You should be able to identify and trace those exceptions you have identified to something very tangible and material. All right, go ahead.
Okay, risk assessment procedures by themselves, however, do not provide sufficient appropriate audit evidence on which to base the audit opinion.
Of course. Next one, go ahead.
The risk assessment procedures shall include the following. A, inquiries of management of appropriate individuals within the internal audit function, if the function exists, and of others within the entity who in the auditor's judgment may have information that is likely to assist in identifying risks of material misstatements due to fraud or error.
I'm sure that is very explanatory. Go ahead. We've explained this a number of times.
B, analytical procedures. C, observation and inspection. The auditor shall consider whether information obtained from the auditor's client acceptance or continuous process is relevant to identifying risk of material misstatement.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Next slide. The documentation.
Or let's do it this way. Let's do it this way. Thank you very much. Let another person also volunteer so that it can be participatory. Another volunteer, please. Francis, thank you so much. Another volunteer.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, Jumoke, you have the floor.
Okay, so we have the documentation shall include 1, discussion among the engagement team members and significant decision. 2, key elements.
Sorry. What this is telling you is that all those risk assessment protocols or procedures you have done, you should document them, right? So the discussion that you have between the engagement team and the significant decision should be documented, right? That's what this is talking about. Go ahead.
So key elements of understanding that is gained through this standard, including the sources and risk assessment procedure performed.
Exactly, go ahead.
Okay, 3, the identified and assessed risk of material misstatements at the financial statement level and at the assertion level.
Go ahead. We've explained a number of all of this. If anybody has questions, they can put it forward.
Okay. 4, the risk identified and related controls about which the auditor has obtained an understanding, in brackets, significant risk.
Very good. So I believe all of this is just talking about all the things we've explained thus far. Make sure you have a documentation for it for future reference purpose. All right, so that would be what you should know as far as this 315 is concerned, right? I will expect that don't just let it stop there. This is just an abstract of what the old standard is all about, right? I will expect you will go through it and come up with more critical questions where need arise, right? So let's look at the next one. Is 320. Is 320 talks about the materiality in planning and performing an audit. Somebody asked a question that, oh, when we are doing our audit planning, I didn't mention anything relating to materiality. Yes, I didn't mention it then because we have not gotten to it. It's 320 that emphasizes that part of your planning is not complete if you don't do necessary materiality planning. So I need another volunteer. Jumoke, thank you very much. Who will take this next one for us? Okay, Khadijat, you have the floor.
Okay, so ISA 320, materiality in planning and performing an audit. Performance materiality definition means the amount or amounts set by the auditor at less than materiality for the financial statement as a whole to reduce to an appropriately low level the probability that the aggregate of uncorrected and undetected misstatements exceeds materiality for the financial statement as a whole. If applicable, performance materiality also refers to the amount or amounts set by the auditor at less than the materiality level or levels for particular classes of transactions, account balances, or disclosures.
Okay, so my first question is this. We've heard about materiality in financial reporting. Materiality in auditing is also being mentioned now. Can we juxtapose what materiality means in financial reporting with what it means in auditing? Who can answer that question? Don't tell me nobody is volunteering or is willing to volunteer to answer the question. I'll call people. Adiola. Adiola, are you there? Adiola, are you there? Ah, she has gone to the kitchen. Freeman, can you tell us what materiality means in terms of financial reporting compared with auditing? Okay, anybody then? Who is volunteering? Raymond.
Sir.
What a coincidence. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. In auditing, materiality means anything that will make the auditor to give anything that will lead to a misstatement in the financial statement. Let's say, for example, you went for an audit and you put your materiality check that any item above 500,000 naira, let's say you are auditing expenses, any expenses above 500,000 naira, you check the approval, the authorization, and signature. If the turnover of the company is, let me say, is like 5 million naira, is material to the company, and it will make you to give a misstatement or a wrong opinion in your report. Why in the financial statement, financial reporting, Materiality has to do with any amount. It depends on the discretion of the accountant. So I think I'm okay, but
Let's talk, Abi.
yes, sir.
All right. Khadijat, you have the floor. I saw your hands up. Oh, Khadija, wait. I saw Adiola's hands up. Adiola, let me hear from you.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening. I call you to talk because I've not heard you speak all the while. So
okay. Sorry, I stepped out. So I just joined. Okay, so my my little knowledge about the topic, your question, and for materiality in accounting is something that is of significance, like an item of the account that is of significance to the entity. You know, what is significant to entity A might not be significant to entity B. So depending on the kind of operation and everything. And this is used by an auditor. So when the auditor understands the kind of entity they're auditing, their kind of entity their client is operating in, they use it to determine what will be significant, what will cause a misstatement in the account, in the financials when doing the audit. So that is what causes that's what's like the materiality, that's what is important, that needs more focus on that could lead to any error or fraud or anything. I think I'm able to say something.
okay, thank you. Olamide, you want to say something? I'm coming back to you, Khadija.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
In my own opinion, I guess materiality in auditing is a situation whereby an item can influence the economic decision of the user of financial statements. While for accounting, materiality concept states that all item of material value should be stated in the financial statement in words and in figures. That's my own opinion.
I agree with what you said about financial reporting as it relates to materiality, because the center of attraction was actually on the users of the financial statement. Disclosures or non-disclosures that you could make in the financials that could make the users or the intended user to making wrong or right decisions. That is the focus in financial reporting. But you've not been able to hit the head on audits. Okay, any other person, but you try, thank you. Khadija's okay, let's have the floor now.
Okay, so for the financial reporting, I totally agree with Olamide, yes. And for the auditing, just materiality just explains the either misstatements or omissions that have effects, like that have influence on the decision that the auditor ends up making as regards the financial statement of the entity.
Exactly. That is the catch point, right? Because the auditor actually has a responsibility to making up an opinion, right? And they don't forget, we at the very first class we had, we said the kind of assurance or confidence that an external auditor gives is a reasonable assurance. It's not absolute. That means that it is not absolute because the auditor will never have the time and resources to check everything one after the other, right? So there is need to have a benchmark. Do you understand? So that benchmark that the auditor has decided to hold on, saying that anything that happens below that benchmark, I'm exonerated, right? I'm not binded by that. But anything that happens above that benchmark, then if it so happens that I make a wrong decision, then it means I've not done the right thing. So please, you need to take note of this. Then further in auditing, the concept of materiality was now further expanded to telling you that, oh, we could have a materiality threshold. But what happens that, oh, there are petty mistakes that could be made that if we aggregate can still become so material. Can we then say the auditor should not be responsible? It won't be exonerated because by the time we add up all the smaller amounts and put it together, it possibly may still be up to that minimum threshold of the materiality threshold. That is what gave rise to performance materiality. So we now lower it a little bit down. That aggregate of smaller mistakes or misrepresentations or undetected errors that could have occurred, that even if we had up and it's still up to a certain threshold, the auditor will not be exempted from being unable to detecting that that's a performance materiality. Then we take it a little bit further, that there are some transactions that are so peculiar in nature, right, that the general materiality may not be able to capture their own peculiarity. Then we talk about the standard mention something about specific materiality, right? And that one is just trying to address a specific section of the financial statement that has a unique peculiarity as compared to other threshold that other materiality will have been able to encapsulate. I believe that is well understood by everyone. Adiola and every other person that have contributed, your contributions is well appreciated, but I just want us to have a much more broad opinion about this. Adeni, you want to make a contribution or a question? Adeni, you have your hands up. You want to make a contribution or a question?
Materiality. I wanted to define materiality in audit. When is material? If the addition, subtraction, or misstatement of that item will distort the decision of the user of financial information. Then I want to ask a question now. Does an auditor need to state matter in his observation when making a report?
Hello?
Does an auditor need to declare materiality threshold when making his report?
It's breaking. I can barely hear you. Can you just communicate on the chat box? I'm so sorry.
I'm saying
I'm so sorry. The network. Okay, you said that does an auditor need to state materiality threshold when making his reports? No. The auditor does not need to state the materiality when making his report. It's part of your own internal work paper. You don't have to state it. It only becomes evidential when there is a litigation. I hope that is clear. All right, so you will agree with me that for us to be able to do proper justice to this particular topic, it requires so much a time, and we are already past 8 now. So, and I don't want to take everybody's time beyond normal. So we have about 30 more slides on this. So what it then means is that we probably will still differ days and complete it next week. I know everybody will need to plan for work tomorrow. Please revise everything that has been done. What we have done to date will be shared during the week. both the materials and the various standards. I believe what we have done thus far has had a measure of value to each and every one of us. I wish you all the best. Any question before we wrap it all up today? We'll be continuing from slide 23. We are still going to 39. So even if you want to continue tonight, we will not be able to wrap it up.
Okay.
Any question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, make it snappy, please.
Yeah,
so at this point, wait, 1 minute, please. At this point, if you are disposed and where you are is light up, you can actually, everybody can actually enable their video.
So can I go on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I'm not disclosed. Hello, sir.
Go ahead. I can hear you.
Mine is like a PO. I don't know if you can help us with a sample of a sample of audit planning.
That is the assignment I gave to everybody first now. Audit planning and risk assessment. You will do it first. Then we will now look at it and correct it.
Okay. Maybe I wasn't around.
Yeah,
Including
it's an assignment everybody has to do. We've had a theoretical talk around it. I will expect that you will take your time to draft something correctly, and we can even share it on the group. Later on, we can then share a much more encompassing thing.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Timothy, you have a question? You raise your hand.
Yes, I did. What was the assignment, please? Please just
to draft up a risk assessment process and also put up an audit planning. You choose a client in a certain industry, put up the right audit plan and the risk assessments. All right, any other question? Any other question? Fatima, any question from you? Ebuka, any question from you? Everybody, if you are disposed, if you are light up enough, enable your video. Let's continue to interact and see each other. Please, it's very, very important. But if you are not comfortable, it's not forceful. But I just want instances whereby we are working on the road or in site services or in other states, and we see each other, we should be able to relate with each other. I think I've mentioned it that I will be in Abuja next week for CITN conference. Those in Abuja, please, I will love for us to have a gathering, even if it's just one night. Everybody in Abuja you signify. We'll agree where we will meet. At least we can have a very light dinner. So if you are in Abuja, signify, I will tell you where I will be. Of course, everybody knows that the CITN program is taking place in International Conference Center. Abdul Wahab, you are smiling. Where are you? Are you in Abuja? You are muted. You are muted. You are muted. I can't hear you.
Yes, sir, in Abuja.
Oh, I'd love to see you in Abuja. I'd love to see you in Abuja. Olamide. Oh, Ebuka too is in Abuja. Let me see your face if you are light up enough. Alamide, are you in Abuja too?
No, no.
Where are you? Lagos?
Ibadan.
Ibadan. I should be in Ibadan very soon. I have some assignments in Ibadan.
Okay.
But not immediately, sure.
Okay, no problem.
When I come to Ibadan, I will call the Ibadan group too.
Okay.
The Ibadan caucus. All right. Any other person who has not spoken? Dolapo. Dolapo, are you there? I didn't hear from you at all today.
Yes, sir.
Are you light up? Let's see you. If you're light up, if you're not, it's fine. It's not forceful. Danjuma, I must see you in Abuja. Hello. All right, so no problem. That's where we will call it up. Call it a day today. I wish you a very fruitful week ahead. Please stay safe. Do the best you could to improve yourself professionally and relax very well. Relax very well and trust that God will crown all your effort with success. It will make more way for you, and in your due season, your glory will be announced for good. Please don't forget all the assignments. Everybody is to draw up an audit plan and risk assessments. And before the next class, let's share it. Then for each and every one, let's make a short skit about how this program has helped you or has added value to you since we've started. It doesn't have to be more than 1 minute. Let's share it on the group so that those who have not been participating will see and they will long to participate. I wish you all the very best. God bless you. See you next week. Good night.